First up, I'm really pleased to welcome to the show one of the most impressive women in this country, if you ask me. She was an damned impressive athlete, and since then, or recently, has been campaigning for fairness in sport. And I'm right behind her all the way. So what a pleasure to welcome to the show Olympic medalist Sharron Davies. Welcome, Sharron.
Good evening, Kevin. How are you? What a nice intro. Thank you so much.
Well, I mean it, but I didn't.
Overinflated, but I'll take it.
Listen, I didn't realise about your mum, and what a sad story that she was one of the victims of this infected blood scandal that happened 30, 40 years ago, where thousands of people were given blood transfusions that were either had hepatitis C, I think that's what your mother's transfusion had, or HIV. Thousands of people essentially given...
Yeah, 30,000 people have been affected, and we've lost so far about 3,000 people, and we're losing 2 a week at the moment. And this is, as you mentioned, something from, decades ago. I mean, my mum's operation was in the 70s. The thing about Hep C, it's a bit of a silent killer. You don't often know that you've got it for quite a while until it starts to cause cirrhosis of the liver, and then by that stage, sometimes it can be too late. With my mum, she spent about 20 years on drugs to try and keep her alive, and eventually succumbed to it, when she was 78. But she was a really sprightly, independent woman who worked for the MOD until she was 70. So I'm absolutely convinced that she would, still be here if it wasn't for the Hep C, which was what was on her death certificate.
Now, some of the victims of this infected blood scandal, which is the most egregious health scandal in the history of the NHS by a mile. I mean, it is absolutely shocking. The people were effectively given death sentences by transfusions given to them by our National Health Service. Now, a lot of people who were victims or relatives of the victims say, well, look, the government really has been dragging its heels on giving us proper compensation. And I've had a few of the victims on my various shows who've just said, as far as we're concerned, the government's waiting for us to die, so it doesn't have to compensate us. Did your mother, Sheila, get good compensation?
No, we didn't have any compensation. The reason I've come out and spoken about it is because I haven't really talked about it much before, but the Sunday Times launched a big campaign for exactly this reason. This can has been constantly kicked down the road, and they just wanted someone, I suppose, with a reasonably high profile who could say, look, this has happened to me, and just give a personal story. It's happened to, as I said, 30,000 people. That is the sort of estimate. And that is the underestimate, right? Because a lot of people might not even still know that they've been affected. And it's been decades where we've just not been able to do anything about it. We've now got a report which was commissioned in 2017. It's due to actually be properly published, I think, on May the 20th. So we're very much hoping that something will happen then. But with haemophiliacs in particular, who were given plasma and it had a very immediate effect on them, many of them have died. Many of them are still living with this disease. For me personally, it was about trying to get help for the people that are living with this right now. Nothing's going to bring back my mum, but, people that are struggling with it right now need some serious help. And I just thought that we needed to shove the government into some sort of action, so they can't just keep putting it off and putting it off. This was about blood that was basically paid for in the 70s and the 80s, which was coming from the USA, predominantly from drug users and from prisoners, and particularly prisons in Arkansas, which came to the UK. So, and they also batched it as well. So what they did is they just basically threw all the blood in together so that you contaminated the whole batch, and then they were just giving that to patients here in the UK. So my mum had a gallbladder operation, and that's when we're pretty convinced that she was given it, So yeah, and for her, it didn't really start to materialize until about 10, 15 years later. And as I said, she spent 25 years on drugs to fight it.
And, I mean, how bad was that for her? I mean, as you say, she was sprightly. When I've seen those lovely pictures of you and your mum when you were a kid, lovely pictures indeed. How bad was it for her, her health struggle after this transfusion?
I think it was also the drugs that she was being given, because you have to suppress the immune system because it's almost fighting itself. So it's kind of killing, the liver. And what she ended up obviously was eventually was liver cancer, and that was what actually killed her, the cirrhosis from the liver cancer. It caused her problems with her bones as well, because that meant that she was being given steroids, and so she had quite a few breaks. But I mean, she was an amazing warrior. You know, she just carried on doing her job. She worked until she was 70 in the MOD. She absolutely loved it, and yeah, just really, really super proud. But as I said, I'm speaking out more for the people that are struggling right now, that need help. You know, these are the people that we need to make sure that if they're dying, that we give them the support that they need, and that we recognise that this has been ignored for absolutely decades. Like I said, 1970 it started, all the way through into blood was tested in 1991. And this report has been going since 2017, and here we are in 2024, and it's taken that long to even manage to get it published properly.
So it seems pretty clear to me, Sharron, that the various governments have been kicking this can down the road. And as I said to you earlier, I've spoken to quite a few victims of this appalling scandal who are convinced that the government, that the various governments' policy has been to wait till they all die and then they don't have to compensate them. I mean, that's disgraceful, isn't it?
Yeah, and in America, you know, there's a huge number of drugs companies that paid out absolute millions in compensation. Lots of countries have taken legal action, including France and Japan, against these American pharmaceutical companies that have been supplying this blood and blood plasma products. And in fact, we've even got, I think, grounds for corporate negligence is on the table as well. So it's, you know, it's very similar in lots of ways to the post office scandal, in the fact that, you know, what was done is been literally by successive governments ignored because it is so horrendous. So I think it's just putting a spotlight on it, bringing a personal face, because we all know that when people can, you know, they can understand personal stories, it brings it alive for all of us to know how it affects individuals, rather than it just being under one big banner all the time. And that's what, you know, I wanted to do, was just to sort of go, well, you know, this is my story. This is my mum. This is what happened to her. She should still be here. I'd love her to see her great-grandchildren. And I miss her every single day because she was my go-to person. And if I can just help one person to get the money to support them in the last days of their life, and I shall be, you know, that's a job well done.
So she died in age 78 in 2017. And as you have quite rightly implied, I mean, there's pretty much no doubt that if it wasn't for this infected blood, she'd probably still be with us now, probably for quite a few more years. I mean, try to sum out how furious that must make you feel. Yeah,
and also I think, you know, what I was cross about was when in 2017, when she died, she was almost written off because of her age by the National Health Service. So eventually, after 6 months of being written off and not getting anywhere with the National Health Service, she then paid, and I went with her to Harley Street to get some, you know, private advice. And they said that particular time, if just a few months earlier, she'd actually gone in and had liver surgery, because the liver regenerates really well. If we'd gone in and had liver surgery, you know, she would have been a good candidate for it, and she probably would have survived. And at that point, they said there was no hope. There was just a drug that she could take, which would maybe prolong her life, but would potentially put her in bed for 6 months. And I just talked my mum out of that, because I just said, you've had this amazing, independent, wonderful life. Live it the way you want to live it. And actually, she went downhill very, very quickly, and, you know, went from this woman who was driving her own car, looking after her own house, to dying within the space of 3 weeks. But we got her home, and she was able to die in her bed and in her own house, surrounded by all her family. So I remember my mum, you know, as this wonderful woman, not someone that spent 6 months in bed in pain.
Yeah.
Which is the way that we all wanted it for her, really.
I get that. Now, but top politicians like Boris Johnson and Sadiq Khan have called on the government to get cracking. Come on, get some money together for the victims of this awful scandal. And there's,
you know, there's other really awful stuff that was done. So for some haemophiliacs, because they were the first people, I suppose, that started to die very quickly, they did hand out some small grants of sort of £24,000-25,000, but they had to sign waivers so that they wouldn't sue the government when those initial handouts were given, you know, I think in the 90s. So, yeah, there's an awful lot to uncover, to unpick.
Yeah, that's ridiculous, though, isn't it? You know, sorry, we just effectively killed you. Here's 25 grand. Forget it. I mean, this is why I think the government, as I say, I keep saying the government, but of course it's quite a few governments over the years, have always kicked this can down the road, because if they compensated people like your mum, and now you, frankly, Sharron, the relatives of the deceased as well deserve compensation. If they compensated everybody properly, you're talking about billions and billions of pounds in the kind of amount, I've heard 10 billion bandied around, the kind of amount that could actually affect the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, as I said, it was more about trying to get money for people that need it right now.
Yeah.
There has been some grants of up to £100,000 that was issued just to partners and to people that of themselves that were infected. And this new sort of extension has been brought into parents of children that have been infected and children of parents that were infected as well, which, you know, would cover my brothers and I. I mean, for me personally, yes, it would be nice, but ultimately that's not the reason. The reason is to try and go, this has got to be talked about. All of this has got to be transparent. You know, that the horrendous kicking of the can has got to be for everyone to understand and know about it, and for something to be done now, not after the elections, now. Because, you know, I, for example, have written to my MP 3 times and not had a single reply so far.
Really?
Yeah, so,
well, I hope,
yeah, exactly.
I hope in some small way we're helping here, Sharron. We'll put this on social media in our inimitable fashion, and we'll get the message out there.
And also for people, you know, don't suffer in silence. That's what my mum would have done. My mum would have suffered in silence because she would have worried that getting any form of compensation was getting it from the National Health Service, but it's not. There's an emergency pot which the government has for this type of claim, so it doesn't come from the NHS pot, you know, and my mum would have worried that she was taking it away from somebody else. So
indeed. Well, listen, I'm very sorry for your loss, and thank you very much for talking to me about this.